Hey guys, Tom here again from SynthHacker.com. In this video, we're going to be making this KAYTRANADA inspired Thumpy bass patch in Serum. So a super simple but effective patch. Towards the end of the video, I'm also going to be giving you some super important tips for how to mix this type of bass synth with your kick, so be sure to stick around for that. As with the last couple of videos, this sound is based on a patch from my Select for Serum preset pack. If you haven't yet checked that out, you can do so by heading to SynthHacker.com or by clicking the link in the description below. So we're going to open a blank patch in Serum. The first thing we're going to do is make sure to turn the mono switch on in the bottom right corner, making sure our bass synth is only playing one note at a time with no clashes. Now, this bass sound has a simple one oscillator square wave as its foundation. I used a Moog based analog square wave table I made myself with an LFO to sweep through the first few frames to get some extra analog character. Using a normal square wave here is perfectly fine, but if you do want to follow along with the same wavetables and MIDI I use in my videos, I'd highly recommend downloading the free SynthHacker Essentials bundle through the link in the description. We're going to keep the unison at 1 to emulate a more analog monophonic bass sound, and we're also going to pitch our oscillator down 2 octaves to get it into the bass frequency range. Just to get ourselves quickly in the ballpark of what we're after, we're also going to set up our filter straight away using the Moog Model 24 dB filter, bringing the cutoff below halfway. We're also going to set up envelope 2 with a quick attack, sustain just below halfway, and a decent amount of release to modulate the cutoff frequency of our filter. This helps to add a little attack and harmonic interest at the start of the sound. Next, we're going to give our sound the amplitude shape we're after by selecting envelope 1 and setting up a similar shape to envelope 2 with a similar decay, sustain, and release. This means that our filter is being modulated in some way for the whole duration of the sound. Now, one of the main characteristics of this bass sound is its almost 808-like punchiness. To achieve this, you can use either an envelope or another LFO in envelope mode to modulate the pitch. I opted to use an LFO, which, although not necessary for this sound, can be a good idea for having more potential nodes to play around with, giving you more control over the modulation. We're going to set the rate to 16th notes with a short decay, no sustain, forming a pluck-like shape. We're then going to set up the LFO to modulate the master tune in the modulation matrix, making sure the direction is set to unipolar, before finally double clicking the amount slider and type in 12 ST to set a modulation range of 1 octave. From here we can go back into our LFO and play around with the shape a little to tune the modulation to our liking. The preset in the pack also has a macro set to change the rate of the LFO, which is also just another easy way to control the character of the pitch bend. So right now the sound is in a solid place, but I pretty much always find that basses like these benefit a lot from the additional harmonics provided by distortion or drive. As well as giving our bass a bit more character, distortion is also a helpful mixing tool in this case, resulting in the notes the bass is playing being more audible at higher frequencies. This is something to always be aware of, as although on its own a bass might sound great, this might not be the case in the context of a full mix with a lot going on. If you've not already, I'd definitely recommend getting yourself a good quality dedicated distortion plugin. One optional step here would also be to add a filter in the effects section after the distortion. This is especially useful if you like the character the distortion is creating, but want to have a bit more control over the upper harmonics. So when using this type of bass sound in a track, the sound design itself is really only half the battle. Also important is getting our bass sound to sit right in the mix, in particular with our kick. So here's a few tips. Firstly, I really want to emphasize the importance of sample selection. As you can see in my kick channel's drum rack, I tried quite a few different kick samples straight off the bat, and many more you don't see here. The way to look at this, in my view, is that it takes less time to cycle through even 100 different kick drums to find one that works than it does to spend hours upon hours of endless tweaking trying to force the first sample you try. Now, that being said, once you have settled on a sample, in most cases there are techniques to further balance the kick and bass. This is definitely a topic that deserves a video of its own, but if there's one technique I'd encourage you to try, it would be dynamic EQ. If we quickly take a look at the frequency spectrum of our kick in FabFilter 3, we can see the kick's resonant peak is between 70 and 120 Hz. Taking a look at Pro Q on our bass channel shows that this frequency region is also occupied heavily by our bass sound. This means that when both are played together, they're going to clash and produce a messy result. One solution to this might be to simply use an EQ to carve space in our bass for the resonant peak of the kick to punch through. This, however, means that whenever the bass is playing without the kick, this attenuation will still be taking place, which isn't ideal. Another common technique here would be to use the kick to sidechain compress the bass sound, meaning that whenever the kick is playing, the bass is being ducked out of the way. In many cases, this is a perfectly fine approach and solves the problem of our clashing frequencies. The issue here though is that the frequencies of the bass synth that aren't clashing with the kick also get attenuated, including the important harmonic frequencies responsible for letting us hear the note the bass is playing, as well as the punchy transient. Now, this is where dynamic EQ becomes so useful, allowing us to combine the benefits of both EQ and sidechain. Firstly, in Pro Q's Ableton device view, we can set the sidechain input to our kick. Next, we want to set up a node in our EQ around the problematic frequency range, making sure to select the Make Dynamic option and clicking the external sidechain icon. From here, we can play around with the dynamic range, threshold, and Q settings until we get a result that we're happy with. As you can hear, this allows more control over the clashing frequencies while still letting the upper harmonics of the bass punch through the mix. For finishing a few touches, we're also going to open the filter slightly and boost some of the mids so that the harmonics can cut through the mix. It's worth mentioning that to help towards the pumping KAYTRANADA style groove, I did still use a very small amount of sidechain compression after Pro Q. What's cool about first using dynamic EQ though is it allowed me to use sidechain compression as more of a subtle effect rather than relying on it for mixing purposes. This just helps the bass sound fit more into the groove of the track as a whole. So there we have it. Like I said, there's a ton more I could cover here, but hopefully this video did a good job of showing you not only how to synthesize a KAYTRANADA style bass, but also give you some bass and kick mixing tips that you can apply as you see fit. Again, this preset is just one of the bass patches in my Solette for Serum pack. If you want to check that out, you can listen to the other preset demos by heading to synthhacker.com or clicking the link in the description. If you want to be notified of when I upload my videos, you can click subscribe and hit the notification bell. And please let me know down below if there's any other sounds from the pack you'd like me to cover, or if you have any other ideas you'd like to see. That's all from me though. As always, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.